She thought she had just thrown out a nobody, but in less than an hour, that single decision would cost her everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The boutique on Madison Avenue shimmered under warm golden lights, its glass displays showcasing dresses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Polished marble floors reflecting every movement like a silent stage where only the elite belonged. And behind the counter stood Vanessa Blake, perfectly styled, her tailored blazer crisp, her posture sharp, her eyes trained to measure worth in seconds, not by character, but by appearance. And when the door opened with a soft chime, Emily Carter stepped inside, her presence quiet, almost invisible, her shoes slightly worn, her dress simple, her hair loosely tied back as if she had more important things to think about than impressing strangers. She paused for a moment, taking in the room, not with awe, but with calm familiarity, as if luxury didn't intimidate her. It simply didn't define her. A few customers glanced over, their eyes lingering just long enough to categorize her before turning away, the subtle shift in energy. Barely noticeable unless you were the one standing in it. And Vanessa noticed immediately, her gaze narrowing just slightly as she approached with a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone smooth but distant. Already assuming the answer didn't matter, Emily returned a small, polite smile. "Yes, I'm looking for a dress," she said softly, her voice steady, her posture relaxed. But Vanessa's eyes had already scanned her from head to toe, making silent calculations, dismissing her before the conversation even began. "Our pieces start at around $2,000, Vanessa replied, her words carefully chosen, not openly rude, but sharp enough to draw a line. A quiet message wrapped in professionalism. Emily nodded gently, as if price was never the issue. "That's fine," she said, her gaze drifting toward a navy silk dress displayed near the center. But Vanessa stepped slightly into her path, her smile tightening just a fraction. "That section is reserved," she added, her tone still calm, still controlled, but now unmistakably exclusionary. A nearby customer paused, pretending to browse while clearly listening. The air shifting, tension building in the smallest of ways. Emily remained still for a second, her eyes steady, her expression unreadable, as if she had heard this tone before, many times, in many places, and yet she didn't react the way most would. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself, didn't shrink either. She simply took a quiet breath. "I understand," she said, her voice almost gentle. And for a moment, Vanessa felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name, something unsettling in how calm this woman remained. But she dismissed it just as quickly, turning slightly, signaling to the security guard near the entrance with a subtle nod. The kind that didn't need words, the kind that carried authority. And as the guard began to move, the soft hum of conversation in the boutique faded, replaced by a silence that pressed in from all sides. Customers watching now, openly, waiting, judging, and Emily, standing there in the center of it all, simply lowered her gaze for a brief moment, then turned toward the door without another word, her footsteps quiet against the marble, each step measured, each movement composed, as if she wasn't leaving in defeat, but choosing to walk away on her own terms. And behind her, Vanessa exhaled softly, convinced she had just maintained the standards of her store, convinced she had done exactly what was expected, never realizing that the moment Emily stepped outside, everything had already begun to change. The glass door closed behind Emily with a soft click that barely registered to anyone inside. But outside, the city moved differently. The late afternoon sun casting long shadows across Madison Avenue as traffic rolled steadily past, yellow cabs weaving between sleek black sedans, the distant hum of engines blending into a rhythm that never stopped. And Emily stepped onto the sidewalk with the same calm composure she carried inside, her expression unchanged, her pace unhurried, as if what had just happened was neither new nor unexpected. Yet beneath that quiet surface, something had shifted, not anger, not embarrassment, but a decision already forming with quiet certainty. She paused near the curb, her eyes scanning the street, not in confusion, but with intention, then reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, her movements precise, controlled, deliberate. As she dialed a number from memory, the line rang once, then twice, before a voice answered immediately, respectful, alert. "Yes, Miss Carter." And Emily spoke in the same soft tone she had used inside, but now there was weight behind it, a subtle authority that had gone completely unnoticed just minutes earlier. "I need you to come to Madison Avenue. The boutique on 57th, she said, her gaze lifting briefly toward the store's polished windows, where Vanessa still stood behind the counter. Unaware. "Bring the team," Emily added, a slight pause following, just enough to let the words settle. "We will handle it today." There was no hesitation on the other end, no questions, only a simple, "Understood," before the call ended. And Emily slipped the phone back into her bag as if nothing significant had just occurred, as if she had simply confirmed a routine appointment. She stepped away from the storefront and began walking down the avenue, her figure blending into the flow of pedestrians, disappearing into the rhythm of the city, while inside, the boutique returned to its polished routine. Vanessa adjusted a display near the entrance, smoothing fabric with practiced precision, her mind already moving on, convinced she had handled the situation efficiently, professionally. Exactly as expected, a couple near the fitting rooms resumed their quiet conversation, one of them glancing briefly toward the door. "That was a bit harsh," the woman murmured, but her companion shrugged. "Places like this have standards," he replied, and the moment passed as quickly as it had come. Vanessa overheard just enough to feel validated, her chin lifting slightly as she turned back toward the register, her confidence settling firmly into place. She believed she understood people, believed she could read them within seconds, separate those who belonged from those who did not. And to her, Emily had been obvious: simple clothes, no visible status, no reason to question the decision. And yet, somewhere beneath that certainty, there lingered a faint unease, something she could not quite name. Perhaps the way Emily had not argued, had not pleaded, had not reacted at all. It was not the usual response, not the response Vanessa was used to seeing, and for a brief moment, her fingers paused on the counter, her mind replaying that calm expression, those steady eyes. But she quickly dismissed it, replacing doubt with routine, turning her attention to a new customer who had just walked in, greeting them with the same polished tone, the same calculated warmth, the boutique lights glowing softly above as if nothing had changed, as if the world outside had not already begun to move in a different direction, as if the quiet woman who had just been turned away was not about to return in a way no one inside could possibly anticipate. And somewhere down the avenue, the low, distant rumble of engines began to grow, still faint, still unnoticed, but steadily getting closer inside the boutique. The soft jazz music continued to drift through the air, blending with the faint rustle of fabric and quiet conversations, creating the illusion of calm, of control, of a world untouched by anything beyond its glass walls. And Vanessa Blake moved through it with practiced ease, adjusting displays, offering measured smiles, her confidence fully restored as if the earlier moment had already faded into insignificance. She believed the day was back on track, predictable, manageable, exactly the way she preferred it. Yet time had begun to move differently, each passing minute carrying something unseen closer to her door. The large clock mounted discreetly above the fitting rooms ticked forward, 5 minutes, then 10, then 20, and with each second, the city outside continued its steady rhythm, though now, if anyone had been paying close attention, they might have noticed a subtle change, the occasional glance toward the street, the faint vibration beneath the polished floor as heavier vehicles passed by more frequently than usual. But inside, no one noticed, not truly. A young sales associate approached Vanessa with a hesitant expression. "Do you think we handled that situation correctly?" she asked quietly, her voice careful, almost uncertain. Vanessa did not even pause. "We maintain standards here," she replied, her tone firm, final, as if the matter required no further discussion, and the associate nodded, though not entirely convinced, stepping back into her role, folding garments with slightly distracted hands, across the boutique. A customer near the window shifted her position, her gaze drifting outside for just a moment longer than necessary, her brow furrowing slightly as she noticed something approaching from down the avenue, something darker, more deliberate in its movement. The distant rumble that had once blended into the city's background noise was now becoming distinct, layered, intentional, like a coordinated arrival rather than random traffic. But before she could say anything, the first of the vehicles came into view, a sleek black SUV gliding to a controlled stop directly in front of the boutique, its engine low and steady, followed almost immediately by a second, then a third, each one aligning with precision, their presence commanding attention without a single raised voice. Conversations inside began to falter, subtle at first, a pause mid-sentence, a glance toward the glass, then another, until the shift became undeniable. The boutique's carefully curated atmosphere began to fracture under the weight of curiosity and something else, something closer to unease. Vanessa noticed it then, the change in her customers, the way their attention had shifted away from her displays, toward the street, and she turned slightly, her expression tightening as she followed their gaze, her eyes landing on the row of black vehicles now parked just beyond the glass, their dark surfaces reflecting the boutique lights in a way that felt almost intrusive, deliberate. And for the first time that afternoon, Vanessa felt a flicker of uncertainty she could not immediately dismiss. The doors of the first SUV opened slowly, deliberately, and a man stepped out, his suit perfectly tailored, his posture composed, his presence quiet yet unmistakably authoritative. Then another followed, and another, each movement synchronized without appearing forced, their eyes scanning the surroundings not with curiosity, but with purpose. And inside the boutique, the room began to fall into a silence that no one had planned, no one had invited, yet no one could interrupt. The young associate near the counter froze mid-motion, a folded dress slipping slightly from her hands as she watched. The customer by the window took a step back, her earlier curiosity replaced by something more cautious, more aware. And Vanessa stood still, her breath held just a fraction longer than usual, her mind racing to categorize what she was seeing, to understand it, to place it within the structure she trusted. But it did not fit. It did not align with anything she expected. And as the final SUV door opened, and a familiar figure began to step out, the realization had not yet fully formed. But it was already too late to stop what was about to unfold the moment her shoes touched the pavement. The energy shifted in a way no one inside could yet understand. Emily Carter stepped out from the final SUV with the same quiet composure she had carried earlier, but now it felt different, heavier, undeniable, her posture straight, her gaze steady, no longer blending into the background but commanding the space around her without effort. The men beside her moved with disciplined precision, not crowding her, not leading her, but clearly there. Because of her, their presence reinforcing something that no words had yet explained. Inside the boutique, Vanessa's eyes locked onto the figure stepping forward, her mind struggling to reconcile what she was seeing with what she believed she knew. The simple woman from before now framed by polished vehicles and composed professionals. The contrast so sharp it felt unreal. A customer near the entrance whispered under her breath, "That is her." And the words spread quietly, like a ripple moving through still water. Emily approached the glass doors without hesitation, each step measured, calm, intentional. And as she reached for the handle, the same door she had been forced to walk through just an hour earlier, the room inside fell completely silent, the soft music still playing but now distant, irrelevant. The door opened with that same gentle chime, but this time it echoed differently, sharper, heavier, and Emily stepped inside, her presence altering the atmosphere instantly. Vanessa straightened instinctively, her professional instincts kicking in, forcing a smile that now felt fragile, uncertain. "Ma'am," she began, her voice attempting control, attempting normalcy, but it faltered just slightly, just enough to reveal the crack beneath. Emily did not respond immediately. Her eyes moved slowly across the boutique, taking in every detail, the displays, the customers, the employees, and finally resting on Vanessa, her expression calm, unreadable. And in that silence, something shifted again. The the balance of power tilting in a way no one could ignore. One of the men from outside stepped forward just enough to be noticed, holding a tablet, his voice clear, professional. "This location is part of the Carter Retail Group portfolio," he said, not loudly, but with enough authority to carry through the room. Vanessa's smile froze completely, her mind racing to process the words. Carter. The name echoed in her thoughts, familiar, important, but not yet fully connecting. The man continued, his tone steady. "Miss Carter requested an immediate review of operations at this branch, and now every eye in the boutique shifted back to Emily, the realization beginning to form, slow but unavoidable. Vanessa felt her throat tighten, her earlier certainty unraveling piece by piece. I was not informed," she managed, her voice thinner now, lacking the confidence it once held. Emily finally spoke, her voice soft, controlled, yet carrying absolute clarity. "No, you were not," she said, and the simplicity of the words landed harder than any accusation. The room remained frozen, no one moving, no one speaking, as the weight of the moment settled fully into place. The same woman who had been quietly dismissed now stood at the center of the boutique as its true authority, not through force, not through volume, but through presence alone. Vanessa's hands, once so steady, now rested uncertainly at her sides, her mind replaying every word, every gesture from earlier, each one now echoing with a consequence she had never anticipated. And Emily, still calm, still composed, took a single step forward, closing the distance just enough to make it undeniable. The line between assumption and reality had been crossed, and there was no way back. The silence inside the boutique did not break. It deepened, pressing into every corner of the room as the weight of what had just been revealed settled over everyone present. And Vanessa Blake stood frozen, her polished confidence unraveling in real time, her mind racing to recover, to regain control of a situation that had already slipped far beyond her reach. "Miss Carter," she said again, this time more carefully, her tone softer, attempting to rebuild the authority she had once held so easily. There must have been some misunderstanding earlier, but even as the words left her mouth, they sounded hollow, fragile, lacking the certainty that once defined her. Emily Carter remained still, her gaze steady, her expression calm, not angry, not triumphant, simply aware, as if she had seen this moment play out long before it ever happened. The man beside her tapped lightly on his tablet, the soft sound echoing in the quiet space. "We have already received multiple reports regarding customer treatment at this location," he stated, his voice even, professional, each word landing with quiet precision. Vanessa's breath caught slightly, her eyes flickering between him and Emily, searching for something, anything that might soften what was coming. "I have always maintained the highest standards," she replied quickly, her voice tightening just enough to reveal the pressure beneath. "This store has an excellent record." Emily tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving Vanessa. "Standards," she repeated softly, the single word carrying more weight than any accusation, and in that moment, the room seemed to shrink. The earlier confidence Vanessa had clung to now turning against her, exposing the difference between what she believed and what she had actually done. A customer near the back shifted uncomfortably, the earlier judgment in their eyes replaced by quiet realization. The associate who had questioned Vanessa earlier now stood completely still, her hands clasped tightly, as if understanding something she had not been able to articulate before. Emily took another small step forward, not aggressive, not rushed, just enough to close the distance further, her presence alone enough to command attention without raising her voice. "Tell me," she said calmly, "what standard was I not meeting?" The question was simple, direct, impossible to deflect, and Vanessa opened her mouth to respond. But no words came, her earlier certainty gone, replaced by a growing awareness that every assumption she had made was now being laid bare. She began, her voice faltering, her mind searching for justification, for something that would make sense of her actions. But there was nothing that could withstand the clarity of the moment. The man with the tablet continued. "Customer profiling, selective service denial, and conduct inconsistent with company policy." He listed, each phrase measured, factual, leaving no room for interpretation. Vanessa's shoulders tensed, her posture no longer composed but rigid, defensive. "I was protecting the brand," she said finally, her voice slightly raised now, the first hint of desperation breaking through. Emily's expression did not change, but there was a quiet shift in her eyes, something sharper now, something that reflected not anger, but clarity. "The brand," Emily repeated, her voice still calm, "is built on how people are treated, not how they are judged." The words settled into the room with undeniable weight. No one moved. No one spoke, as the truth of that statement lingered in the air, and Vanessa felt it, the full impact of everything she had done. Not in a dramatic collapse, not in a loud confrontation, but in the quiet realization that the foundation she believed she was protecting had been undermined by her own actions. Emily glanced briefly around the boutique, taking in the silent witnesses, the carefully arranged displays, the space that once reflected exclusivity, now feeling something else entirely, something more exposed. Then she looked back at Vanessa, her voice steady, final, effective immediately, she said, and the words, simple as they were, carried the unmistakable weight of consequence. The room held its breath, the moment stretching just long enough for everyone to understand that nothing would be the same after this. And Vanessa, standing at the center of it all, finally understood that the decision she had made just 1 hour earlier had already determined everything that was happening now. No one moved when the words settled into the air. It was not a loud command, not a dramatic declaration, but it carried a finality that no one could ignore. And for a moment, even the city outside seemed distant, as if the world had narrowed down to this single space, this single decision. Vanessa Blake felt it first, not as shock, but as a slow unraveling. The realization spreading through her chest that there was no correction, no explanation that could reverse what had already been set in motion. Her lips parted slightly as if to speak, but the words did not come, because there was nothing left to say that had not already been revealed in her own actions. The man with the tablet stepped forward again, his movements calm, practiced. "Your access will be revoked immediately," he said, his tone unchanged, professional to the end. And another member of the team moved quietly toward the back office, not rushing, not forcing, simply following a process that had clearly been executed many times before. Vanessa's eyes followed them, her posture still rigid, but now without purpose, without direction, as if the role she had held so tightly had already been taken from her before she could even process it. A customer near the entrance shifted her weight, her earlier confidence replaced by an almost uncomfortable awareness, as if witnessing something more than just a managerial decision, something deeper, something that spoke to a truth people preferred not to confront. The young associate who had questioned Vanessa earlier stood frozen, her eyes moving between Emily and the unfolding scene, and for the first time, there was no confusion in her expression, only clarity, the kind that comes when something unspoken is finally made visible. Emily Carter remained exactly where she stood, her presence steady, her expression composed. She did not raise her voice, did not repeat herself, because she did not need to. Everything that needed to happen was already happening, and the power in that moment did not come from force, but from restraint, from the quiet certainty of someone who did not need to prove anything. Vanessa finally took a small step back, the movement subtle, almost imperceptible, but it marked the shift completely. The space she once controlled now no longer hers. Her gaze dropped briefly, not in defeat, but in recognition, as if she was finally seeing the situation without the filter she had always relied on. "I was just doing my job," she said softly, the words barely carrying across the room, but in the silence, they were heard. And Emily's eyes softened just slightly, not with sympathy, but with understanding. "No," Emily replied, her voice calm, unwavering. "You were making choices." The distinction hung in the air, simple, undeniable, and it settled into every corner of the boutique, into every person who had witnessed the moment, because it was not just about Vanessa anymore. It was about something larger, something that extended beyond this room, beyond this single interaction. The team member returned from the back office, nodding once, confirming that everything was in motion. And the boutique, once filled with quiet exclusivity, now felt different, exposed in a way it had never been before. Emily glanced around one final time, taking in the space not as a place of status, but as a place of consequence. Then she turned slightly, her movement signaling that her part in this moment was complete. She did not linger, did not seek acknowledgement, because she did not need it. And as she began to walk toward the door, the same path she had taken earlier, the room remained silent, not out of tension now, but out of something closer to reflection. Vanessa stood still, watching, understanding now in a way she had not before, that the moment she had dismissed someone based on appearance had already set everything into motion. And as the door opened once again, the soft chime echoing through the space, it no longer sounded the same, because this time, everyone inside understood exactly what had just happened and why the door closed softly behind Emily Carter. But this time, the sound did not signal an ending. It marked a shift that lingered long after she stepped back onto the sidewalk. Outside, the three black SUVs remained in place, engines idling low, their presence steady, controlled, and as Emily moved toward them, the men who had accompanied her adjusted their positions with quiet precision, not drawing attention, yet impossible to ignore. Pedestrians along Madison Avenue slowed, their curiosity drawn to the scene without fully understanding it. A woman passing by glanced twice, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of the quiet authority surrounding someone who looked so ordinary just moments ago. And Emily, once again, did not acknowledge the attention, her focus steady, her pace unchanged, as she reached the open door of the vehicle. But before stepping inside, she paused briefly, her gaze lifting toward the boutique windows, the same glass that had reflected judgment not long ago now reflecting something else entirely, something closer to truth. Inside, the atmosphere had not recovered. It had settled into a stillness that felt heavier than silence. Vanessa Blake remained near the center of the boutique, her posture no longer rigid, but uncertain, as if she had been stripped of something invisible yet essential. The authority she once carried so effortlessly now replaced by a quiet awareness she could not escape. The staff moved carefully, speaking in low voices, each action measured, as if the entire space had become fragile, and the young associate who had questioned everything earlier finally stepped forward, her voice hesitant but clear. "What happens now?" she asked, not to Vanessa, but to the room itself, and no one answered immediately, because the answer was already unfolding, just not in a way anyone was used to seeing. Vanessa exhaled slowly, her eyes moving across the boutique, seeing it now without the filter she had relied on for so long. The displays, the customers, the carefully curated environment, all of it suddenly felt different, not because it had changed, but because she had. "Now," she said quietly, almost to herself, "we start over." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that suggested something deeper, something earned rather than declared, and for the first time, her voice held no arrogance, no assumption, only recognition. Outside, Emily stepped into the SUV, the door closing gently behind her, and as the vehicles began to move, one by one, merging back into the flow of the city, there was no spectacle, no dramatic exit, just a quiet departure that left an imprint far stronger than any loud display ever could. The boutique remained standing, the lights still glowing, the doors still open, but something fundamental had shifted within its walls, something that would not fade with time, because it was no longer about a single moment or a single mistake. It was about understanding the cost of judgment, the weight of assumptions, and the quiet power of dignity. And as the city continued around them, unchanged and indifferent, those who had witnessed what happened inside that boutique carried with them something far more lasting than the scene itself, a realization that could not be unseen, that the people they overlooked, the ones they dismissed without a second thought, might be the very ones holding the power to change everything. And that day, without raising her voice, without demanding attention, Emily Carter reminded everyone in that room exactly what respect truly looks like. The city moved on as if nothing had happened. But inside the boutique, the silence lingered like a presence that refused to leave, the kind of silence that does not come from absence of sound, but from the weight of realization settling into every corner. The soft music still played, but it no longer filled the space the same way. It felt distant, almost irrelevant. As Vanessa Blake stood near the counter, no longer directing, no longer controlling, simply standing, her hands resting lightly against the polished surface as if she needed something stable to hold on to, her reflection staring back at her from the glass display, but it did not look the same, not because her appearance had changed, but because what she saw behind it had. The confidence she once carried now replaced with something quieter, something more honest. The young associate approached slowly, her footsteps careful, respectful, not out of fear, but out of awareness. "I did not understand before," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence in a way that felt necessary. Vanessa did not respond immediately, her eyes still fixed on the reflection in front of her, as if she was trying to understand the difference between who she thought she was and who she had just revealed herself to be. "Neither did I," Vanessa finally replied, her voice calm, but stripped of the certainty that once defined it, and that admission, simple as it was, carried more weight than anything she had said earlier in the day. Across the boutique, customers moved differently now, not rushing, not speaking loudly, their expressions thoughtful, as if each of them was replaying the moment in their own way, reconsidering their own assumptions, their own silent judgments. A woman near the window gently set a dress back onto its hanger, her movements slower, more deliberate, as if the act itself required more thought than before, and the space, once defined by exclusivity, now felt like something else entirely, something closer to reflection. Vanessa turned slightly, her gaze moving toward the door where Emily had exited, and for a brief moment, the memory replayed clearly, the calm voice, the steady eyes, the quiet strength that had never needed to announce itself. And Vanessa understood now that the moment of humiliation had not been the most important part. It had been the choice she made before it, the decision to judge, to assume, to act without understanding. And that realization did not come with anger or regret alone. It came with clarity, the kind that does not disappear once it arrives. One of the team members stepped forward, speaking in a tone that remained professional. "Steady. We will be conducting a full review of this location," he said. Not as a threat, but as a process, something that would unfold regardless of anyone's feelings. Vanessa nodded slowly, not resisting, not arguing, because for the first time, she was not trying to protect an image. She was beginning to understand the cost of maintaining one at the expense of something more important. "I understand," she said quietly, and the words were different now, no longer a dismissal, but an acknowledgement, a recognition of responsibility that had not existed before. Outside, the street carried on, people passing by without knowing what had shifted inside those walls. But for those who had witnessed it, the moment stayed, not as a spectacle, but as a lesson, subtle yet powerful. And as the boutique lights continued to glow into the evening, illuminating the same displays, the same polished floors, the same carefully arranged pieces, there was something new beneath it all, something that could not be seen but could be felt. A change not in the space itself, but in the way it would be lived in from that moment forward. And Vanessa, standing quietly in the center of it, finally understood that the true measure of any place was not the price of what it sold, but the respect it gave to those who walked through its doors. The boutique did not return to what it once was, not the next day, not the day after, because something deeper than policy had changed, something that could not be rewritten in a handbook or corrected with a simple meeting. The air itself felt different, lighter in some ways, heavier in others, as if every person who stepped through those doors now carried an awareness that had not existed before. Vanessa Blake arrived early that morning, long before the first customer, long before the city reached its usual rhythm. The quiet inside the boutique no longer felt like control. It felt like responsibility. She moved slowly through the space, adjusting displays not out of routine, but with intention, her movements deliberate, thoughtful, as if each detail now carried meaning beyond appearance. She paused near the entrance, her eyes resting on the glass doors where everything had begun, and for a moment, she simply stood there, not as a manager, not as someone in charge, but as someone who finally understood the weight of a single decision. The young associate entered shortly after, offering a small, respectful nod, and this time, Vanessa returned it with the same sincerity. No hierarchy, no distance, just acknowledgement. The team gathered quietly before opening, not for a formal meeting, but for something unspoken, something that did not need structure to be understood. Vanessa looked at each of them, her voice calm, steady. "We are not here to decide who belongs," she said, her words simple, but grounded in something real. "We are here to serve everyone who walks in with respect." There was no resistance, no hesitation, because everyone in that room had seen what happened, had felt it, had carried it with them. And now, they understood. As the doors opened and the first customers entered, the boutique felt different, not less elegant, not less refined, but more human. The same marble floors, the same lighting, the same displays, yet the atmosphere had shifted in a way that could not be measured. A woman in casual clothes stepped in, hesitating slightly as her eyes moved across the space. And this time, a sales associate approached her immediately, not with judgment, but with genuine warmth. "Welcome in," she said, her tone open, inviting, and the difference was subtle, almost invisible, yet it changed everything. Outside, the city continued as it always did, people passing by, unaware of what had unfolded within those walls. But for those inside, the lesson remained. Not as a story to be told, but as a standard to be lived. And somewhere across the city, Emily Carter moved on with her day, her role in that moment complete, never seeking recognition, never needing acknowledgement, because the impact she left behind spoke louder than anything she could have said. She had not raised her voice, had not demanded respect. She had simply revealed the truth, and in doing so, changed everything. And that day, in a quiet boutique on Madison Avenue, dignity was not announced, it was demonstrated, not through power, but through presence, not through force, but through clarity, and it left behind something no one there would ever forget. Respect is always revealed when you least expect it. If you believe in stories that uncover truth and dignity, hit like and subscribe because the next story might change the way you see the world. Thank you for watching.